All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're unpacking a really critical period of developments, basically from July 20th to August 18th, 2025. We're going to cover everything from major geopolitical moves to huge policy shifts here at home. It was an absolutely packed month, so let's jump in.
So, here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll kick things off with the global scene. Some serious headwinds, but also some big diplomatic wins. Then, we'll see how all that connects to the Indian economy, which has been surprisingly resilient. After that, we'll pivot to some major shakeups in the judiciary and governance, explore some incredible breakthroughs in science and tech, and we'll wrap up with what's happening in social justice and culture.
Okay, first up, foreign policy. And this month was really a story of navigating some very choppy waters, a real chess match of tension and smart maneuvering.
The story that absolutely dominated the headlines was the trade situation between India and the United States, which was really heating up. I mean, it was a series of fast, pretty aggressive moves that left a lot of Indian exporters feeling, well, pretty uncertain.
It all kicked off with tariffs on Indian imports, which then got doubled to an effective rate of 50%. I mean, wow, that is a massive blow, especially for huge sectors like textiles and electronics. So what on earth was the justification for such a steep hike?
Well, as you can imagine, there were two very different stories. The U.S. pointed to India's ongoing energy and defense relationship with Russia. But India's response was swift and direct, calling the whole thing unfair and unreasonable, and making the very valid point that, hey, a lot of Western nations, the U.S. and its allies included, are also still trading with Russia.
Now, if you're a UPSC aspirant, this is exactly the kind of tangled web you need to be able to unravel. Keeping track of who did what, when, and why it matters is absolutely crucial. A really smart way to do this is with AI tools like Dalvoy's UPSC GPT, which can help you map out the whole timeline and see how all these different pieces connect.
But here's the interesting part. While all this drama was unfolding with the US, India was playing a whole different game elsewhere and winning. The absolute highlight was signing CETA, the big trade agreement with the UK. I mean, this is India's first deal like this with a G7 nation in over a decade. That's huge. Plus, we saw a new strategic partnership with the Philippines and improving relations with the Maldives. It's a clear strategy. When you're facing pressure from one direction, you strengthen your alliances in others.
So you might be thinking, with all that going on, the economy must have taken a hit, right? Well, let's take a look, because the picture on the domestic front was mixed, but actually surprisingly positive.
The one number that really turned heads was this: 1.55%. That was the retail inflation for July, an 8-year low. A lot of this was thanks to falling food prices and a solid monsoon season.
This is what led a lot of economists to call a Goldilocks situation. You know the story, right? Not too hot, not too cold, but just right. The economy was growing, but not so fast that it was causing runaway inflation. And this wasn't just talk. S&P Global actually upgraded India's rating to BBB, reflecting that cautious optimism.
And the real rock star of the economy this quarter? No question. It was electronics. Exports shot up by a massive 47%, a lot of that fueled by Apple's Make in India push. And here's the irony. Guess who the #1 destination was for all of these exports? Yep, the United States. Kind of funny, right?
Speaking of the economy, you know that big topics like the upcoming GST reforms are always prime material for exams. A great way to really nail down the details is to quiz yourself. You can actually use tools like Dalvoy's mock test generator to create your own custom tests on these specific policies. It's a game changer for study prep. Okay, let's pivot from the economy and head into the halls of power to talk about governance and polity. And believe me, some truly unprecedented things happened this month.
So one of the biggest stories was something we almost never see: the start of removal proceedings for a high court judge, Justice Yashwant Varma of the Allahabad High Court. This sets in motion a very rare, very complex constitutional process. It's not simple. First, a bipartisan motion has to be admitted in the Lok Sabha, then the Speaker has to create a special inquiry committee, and only after that committee gives its report can Parliament even vote on the matter.
Now, for anyone prepping for the mains exam, your ears should be perking up. This is a classic topic. You don't just want to know the steps, you need to be able to write about them perfectly. A fantastic way to practice is to write out your answer and then use a tool like Dalvoy's mains Evaluator to see how it stacks up against what toppers have written.
And that wasn't all. It was a super busy month across the board. The Supreme Court was active, weighing in on things like electoral transparency in Bihar and the creamy layer issue for SC/ST reservations. Parliament passed some key legislation, including a really important national sports governance bill.
And of course, at the state level, the situations in Manipur and Ladakh continue to be major areas of focus.
All right, time to look ahead. Let's talk about what's happening in the world of science, technology, and the environment. The things that are literally charting our future.
A huge piece of good news came from space with the successful launch of the NISAR satellite. This thing is a game changer. It's a massive team-up between NASA and ISRO, designed to give us the most detailed look ever at our planet's changing systems. Everything from melting ice caps to deforestation.
But from the high of that achievement, we have to come back down to earth. And the news on the environmental front this month was also deeply sobering. It was just tragic. We saw devastating flash floods hit parts of Uttarakhand and Kishwar.
So what's causing this? It's really a deadly one-two punch. On one hand, you have climate change throwing these more frequent, more extreme weather events at us. And on the other, you have this ongoing problem of unplanned construction in areas that are already ecologically fragile. It's a recipe for disaster.
And to really grasp why these disasters are so devastating, you have to understand the geography. This is where a tool like Dalvoy's AI maps can be so powerful. It lets you visualize the actual topography, the river systems, and see exactly where those vulnerable zones are. It brings the whole issue to life.
Okay, for our final section, let's bring it all home and talk about the issues that really affect people on the ground every day. Social justice and culture, the very fabric of our nation.
One of the big updates was on skilling initiatives. Take the PMDoc scheme, for instance. It's all about providing training to people from marginalized communities. The latest numbers show that about 39% of the trainees have landed a job. So that's progress for sure, but it also shows there's still quite a ways to go. And on a related note, we also saw Karnataka introduce a really important Devadasi rehabilitation bill this month.
Wow. So when you step back and look at it all, from global trade disputes and diplomatic wins to our own economic numbers, constitutional procedures, triumphs in space, and tragedies in the mountains, you start to see how it's all connected, right? So the real question to leave you with is this. How does connecting all these dots, seeing that bigger picture, prepare you to be a more effective leader, a better civil servant? That's really what it's all about. Definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining us.